perspective.
Thank you, Thami. Looking at your top stories, the U.S. to meet DRC and Rwanda senior officials and Ukrainian president to hold talks with British Prime Minister. Your latest news, greetings to our listeners. The United States has called senior officials from the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda to Washington this week for talks on the stalled peace process in eastern Congo. A spokesperson for Congo's presidency said bilateral meetings between the U.S. and each side are scheduled for today, with the trilateral meeting tomorrow if progress is made. This would mark the first encounter between the parties since the U.S. Treasury sanctioned the Rwandan Defense Force and 4 senior officers on the 2nd of March. The meeting will take place as dozens of African government officials gather in Washington for a Powering Africa Summit, including several energy ministers from across the continent. Medical supplies to clinics dealing with the humanitarian crisis in Sudan could run out within 2 weeks unless shipments are rapidly rerouted as disruptions continue due to the conflict in the Middle East. The charity Save the Children says the expanding U.S.-Israeli war on Iran has shaken global supply chains with airspace closures and the halt of shipping through the Straits of Hormuz. Some $600,000 worth of essential medicines are stuck in imports in Dubai. About 90 Sudanese government-run clinics serving roughly 400,000 patients rely on the charity's supply of medicine. A senior Zambian government official has alleged that some political parties were asking prospective female candidates for sexual favors in exchange for selection ahead of the August general election. The civil service head of the gender office in the presidency, Mainga Kabika, did not name the political parties involved. Zambia has a big gender imbalance in national politics, with around 15% of MPs being women. Kabika was addressing a conference of state prosecutors when she revealed that women had been in touch with her about what they were being asked to do. The general election is due on the 13th of August. The judicial review of the application by South Africa's former President Jacob Zuma for the Truth and Reconciliation Commission Cases Inquiry chairperson Justice Sisika Mpepe to step down is merely an attempt to assassinate her character. This is according to inquiry lawyer Thembeka Ngubeni. Zuma has contended that Mpepe has hatred for him and acted improperly in being part of the Constitutional Court's decision to jail him for 15 months for contempt of court in 2021. Ngubeni says Zuma's attempt to have her pay personal costs in the matter should also be rejected.
Justice Khampepe has been threatened and insulted. She has been threatened with preka. She has been insulted. I've shown you all of the insults. She has been accused of criminal conduct without a shred of evidence. Judges in her position deserve the protections of Section 47. She is performing a public duty on a matter of national importance, yet personalized attacks have been directed at her with reckless abandon. She has absolutely no one to protect her. Let's be serious. She really has no one to protect her, including the very president who appointed her. She has been left to dry on her own.
Lastly, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky will hold talks with the British Prime Minister in London today. This is amid growing concerns that the Iran war is boosting Russia's war effort. Zelensky is also worried about rising oil prices linked to the conflict in the Gulf, bolstering Moscow's finances. Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine more than 4 years ago. The BBC's James Landale.
Right now, Ukraine's facing a harsh tide. Rising oil prices fueling Russia's war machine, allies distracted and divided over the Middle East. So President Zelensky is on a tour of European capitals to keep their minds on his country's fight. The Prime Minister agrees, saying the Gulf War should not be a windfall for Russia. In Downing Street today, he and Ukraine's president will agree a new defence partnership. Officials say it'll combine Ukraine's expertise with the UK's industrial base to develop new ways of defending against cheap attack drones.
Recapping on your top stories, the United States has called senior officials from the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda to Washington this week for talks on the stalled peace process in Eastern Congo. Channel Africa News, I'm Onelin Zinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news this hour, according to Samir Nukovic's lawyer, the $899,000 saga is hurting the South African Premier Soccer League brand, while English Premier League side Chelsea fined over secret payments. I'll tell you why at 4:30.
Connecting Africa to the world. Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni brings you the latest insights on Africa's economy.
It has gone exactly 6 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time. A very good afternoon to you, Zambia. Good afternoon, Malawi, the Seychelles, Madagascar, Niger, Togo. Good afternoon to you, Morocco, Libya. Good afternoon, Africa. Welcome to Africa in Business on Channel Africa. I'm Thami Ngubeni. Coming up for you this hour, the Dangote refinery ramps up its production in order to avert fuel shortages caused by the Israel-US-Iran conflict, and localization seen as a key to unlocking opportunities for South Africans at the Buy Local Summit and Expo. Do stay connected to Africa and the world with Channel Africa, the international voice of the South African Broadcasting Corporation. Watch or listen anytime, anywhere at channelafrica.co.za, on the Channel Africa mobile app and on SABC Plus. Or if you choose, you can listen or watch via the DSTV and OpenView audio bouquets. You can also catch us on social media at Channel Africa on Facebook and Channel Africa One on all other platforms. Channel Africa, first with the African story.
Africa means business. Tune into Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni for the future of the African economy. Channel Africa, the African Perspective.
Off. We begin here this afternoon as the Southern Africa Oil and Gas Conference draws to a close. South Africa's Deputy Minister of Mineral and Petroleum Resources, Phumzile Mgcina, says one of the biggest challenges facing the country's petroleum sector is persistent opposition from environmental lobby groups, which she argues continues to hinder oil and gas development initiatives. The event brought together industry leaders, policymakers as well as investors to deliberate on the region's energy future and explore opportunities within Southern Africa's oil and gas sector. Channel Africa's economics reporter Innocent Samosa has more.
South Africa's Department of Mineral and Petroleum Resources says the Orange Basin has emerged as a world-class frontier following significant oil discoveries in Namibia, with geological evidence suggesting these resources may extend into South African waters. Despite this potential, the department notes that progress has been delayed due to ongoing opposition to oil and gas development, often driven by environmental protection concerns. Phumzile Mgcina is the Deputy Minister of Mineral and Petroleum Resources.
Part of the challenges that we discovered, as much as the department, we are working with with our agency when there are those appeals. But we also discovered that environmental was very far away from the process. So now we've roped them in. We are working with them. We had a meeting with the minister who confirms that they are looking forward to work with us and make sure that they're speeding up the process of appeals. Then when we go to justice, that's where the appeals that are taking place. So we also wanted them to work with us to speed up the process by setting up the special courts so that we can follow all processes as government. We don't want to be seen as if we are the ones, as we've been saying, that we are not, we are not putting our hands, actually.
The department's Deputy Director General, Ntokozi Nzimande, outlines the progress made in transforming the sector with a focus on translating these efforts into job creation and broader economic growth.
To unlock the potential, we developed a standalone legislation which was passed into law by the President in 2024, and that's the Upstream Petroleum Resources Development Act. Subsequent to that, we then went on to develop the regulations. A minister spoke about these regulations earlier on. They are almost at the tail end. There is a session planned for this Wednesday for us to go through line by line on a few issues. It's about 4 issues that industry has raised with us, and those issues relate mainly to the cost recovery mechanism on the state carried interest. We just want to have that last session to clarify those with industry and find each other, and then we will be ready for Minister to gazette the regulations for implementation.
She says steady progress is being made through collaboration with all relevant agencies.
But additionally, a lot of work and research has been done with the Petroleum Agency of South Africa, where we are coming up with guidelines to say how do we make it easy to get licenses in the oil and gas space. What is it that they need to follow to develop certain protocols? The law talks about them honoring their social responsibility through social and labor plans. Now, considering that this is the new of its kind for the oil and gas sector, we're working on regulations and simplified mechanisms to effect those areas that are contained in the main legislation. So overall, there's a lot of work being done between ourselves, the Petroleum Agency of South Africa, and other players and the industry.
For Channel Africa News, I'm Innocent Samosa in Cape Town, South Africa.
Africa in Business on Channel Africa.
We turn our focus now to the ongoing Middle East conflict, which has sparked a sharp energy crisis in Nigeria, with fuel prices surging by approximately 47%. Can you believe that? 47% over just a 6-week period. This as global prices topped the $100 per barrel price. In response, the Dangote refinery, which has a production capacity of around 650,000 barrels per day, is prioritizing domestic supply to avert the shortages. Meanwhile, some analysts are urging the government to use the anticipated windfall from higher oil prices to help ease the burden on citizens and businesses, warning that escalating fuel costs are already exacerbating economic hardships. For more on this, we joined on the line by our correspondent in Nigeria, Jonathan James Mliamgo. A very good afternoon to you, Jonathan. Good to be talking to you once again. But maybe let's start with an understanding of how the Nigerian government is responding to the fuel price volatility, as well as these disruptions in supply that have been linked to this US-Israel-Iran conflict. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Thami, and nice talking to you this afternoon. With respect to Nigeria's handling of the current situation, the official position by the government, the federal government of Nigeria, is that it indeed has noted that this situation does exist, and it has put in place measures that will make sure that the country doesn't get to grapple with the consequences of the war in Iran more than it already is dealing with. And it may interest you to know that just like many countries around the world, the impact was sharp, it was sudden, and it was deep. And for a country that has an economy that revolves around petroleum and petroleum-related products and services, you can only imagine the impact on domestic public transportation, which is hugely privately operated. And that always has a way of ricocheting or multiplying into other sectors. For instance, in terms of value chains delivery for agricultural products, the prices of transportation goes up, then the prices of food go up. The price of transportation goes up, then the cost and impact on workers getting to work goes up. And that is what we have seen so far. But the federal government said that it is looking at that. And I think, was it a week ago or so, the nation's Minister of Finance and the Coordinating Minister of the Economy said that the federal government is closely watching this, but they haven't spelled out clearly what these measures are. Thami?
So we understand, Jonathan, that the Independent Petroleum Marketers Association of Nigeria has asked the federal government to cut off some taxes as well as charges on petroleum products in order to help reduce the prices at the pumps. What has been the response of the government to this?
Well, the prices are still kept as to how they've been. In fact, what we have seen actually has been sharp increases, all in the span of literally hours in some cases. And the Dangote refinery is now, as at last month, it had revved up its production capacity and was responsible for production of about 92% of the nation's local fuel consumption. And one of the things that we also saw is the federal government, through the Department for NMDPRA, that's the department that issues licenses for petroleum importation. So what we saw was an immediate pronouncement by government saying that henceforth they are no more going to be issuing licenses because there's sufficient petroleum locally. But now with all of the unions asking for this, on the one hand, we have had Dangote Refinery, which operates entirely privately, offer its own explanation as to the reasons for this increases in fuel prices. It has been clear to say, yes, Nigeria's consumption, the crude has been coming from Nigeria, but it is now grappling coincidentally with a scenario where there was a dip in the crude that it is being supplied. So take, for instance, Thami, typically Dangote Refinery would receive about 9 to 11 vessels of crude. In the last month, it has dipped and it is only barely getting about 5 vessels. And what Dangote says is that is not sufficient, and it will now have to import crude from the US and other places to be able to make up for this shortfall. And once that starts to happen, it means the entirety of the fuel price is not dependent on Nigeria's own setting of the fuel price, but on the international scale. And then it has commitments on the international level that it needs to pay its loans and debts that are tied to also international things like international insurance, amongst other things. So all of this, from Dangote Refinery's own explanation, kind of accounts for what the increase in the gantry cost of petroleum is in Nigeria. So far, we haven't seen the unions push back at the government's slow response. Maybe this week, we most likely will see that as the cost of fuel keeps biting harder locally.
And I'd like to continue on this Dangote strain or train of thought right now. Could one say that the measures that were taken by Nigeria in order to reduce reliance on imported petrol since the start of the year have actually ensured that Dangote Refinery was ready for the global supply chain shocks, such as the one that we are experiencing now?
I mean, it certainly can account for that. One of the things that I would say is that we have seen the federal government and Dangote say at any point in time, part of its strategic plans have been to ensure that it is always holding at least supply for a minimum of 30 days. And that, it appears, is what is the buffer at the moment. But with the situation that we're having where the Dangote Refinery is saying that it isn't getting as much crude because, and other factors account for the federal government not giving Dangote that much crude. You may know that Nigeria in previous governments had signed a lot of forward sale agreements with many of the, with much of the crude that is yet to be prospected in the country. So now what happens is a balancing game where they have to meet these international obligations alongside meeting local situations. And you know that it's kind of like a keg of gunpowder. If it's not well handled, it can make the economy grind to a halt. But if you also do not honor your international commitments, it can also lead to a downgrading of your business prospects with nations and corporate entities around the world. So far, that has turned out to be a blessing. But clearly, it seems that Nigeria is not yet out of the woods to say it will look into depending solely on local production capacity. Thami.
And on that note, should the war persist, what are the risks that Nigeria might face? You know, should the country become overly dependent on the Dangote petroleum refinery as its single source? What other options does the country have?
So far, what we have seen the federal government trying to do is to push to expedite a granting of licenses for deep water prospecting of oil, especially to its what is called the Local Content Act, which encourages local businesses participating in this. Up until now, the bulk of local businesses that participate in the oil and gas business are mostly confined to the offshore, the onshore. Well, they mostly prospect on land, but deep water has always been by corporates that are mostly international. But speaking to the worst case scenario of what we could see, I think we're already seeing glimpses of it. And if this isn't well managed, you would naturally see the situation spiral into inflation that can go out of control. And Nigeria is only just recovering from one of the craziest inflations it has seen in its existence. So for it to now get back to that, into the doldrums, it certainly is not going to speak well for the country. Then we probably would see a situation where Dangote's refinery may have to scale down on operations if it's not able to do the things that it's doing in terms of getting the crude that it should be getting. So I think there's a balancing act. It's a delicate one, but the federal government, especially having not made any comments about this, there's a delicate balancing act that it is trying to do so that it is able to sell crude and keep its revenues coming, but it is also able to supply crude locally to keep the Dangote refinery going as well. Thami?
Jonathan James Demgo, always a pleasure. Thank you for that update coming out of Nigeria.
Have a nice day.
Have a great one too. Always a pleasure. He takes us now to 22 minutes after 4 p.m.
60 years of Channel Africa. Your trusted voice. Your African perspective. Into the future. Channel Africa is evolving, and so are you. Stay connected wherever you are with our brand new website and mobile app. Stream your favorite shows. Catch up on African news, culture, and conversations, all at your fingertips.
Africa is just a tap away.
Your world, your stories, now on the go.
Stay connected wherever you are.
Visit channelafrica.co.za or download the Channel Africa app today. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
The whole population of Africa has been shocked to the depth of its soul.
For 60 years, Channel Africa has been the voice that connects the continent, telling our stories and sharing our vision with the world. This year, we mark 6 decades of broadcast excellence.
60 years of stories, sound, and connection.
6 years of African conversations that matter.
This is 60 years of broadcast excellence.
Rooted in Africa's heartbeat and looking boldly into the future. Join Channel Africa as we celebrate 60 years of broadcasting. Still strong, still vibrant, and still giving you the African perspective.
Channel Africa.
African enterprise meets global opportunity. Africa in business on Channel Africa.
We turn our focus now to issues of transport, and transport systems are increasingly being recognized as a key driver of economic growth, job creation, as well as social inclusion, particularly in developing economies. At the inaugural National Transport Conference, which is underway at the Gallagher Convention Centre in Midrand, north of Johannesburg, South Africa, industry leaders as well as global experts are sharing insights on how countries can leverage transport infrastructure to unlock opportunity and build more sustainable economies. Our reporter, Lebohang Mabange, has more.
There's a growing consensus among transport and logistics experts that efficient, well-integrated transport systems are central to unlocking economic potential and strengthening global competitiveness. Speaking during a panel discussion at the National Transport Conference, Paul Dyson, Chief Executive Officer of Crossrail International, says while the economic impact of transport infrastructure is widely understood, the real opportunity lies in maximizing its wider benefits.
There's lots of discussions with transport planners around the world about the benefits that infrastructure and particularly rail infrastructure projects can bring to your economy. I think broadly the economic benefits are well understood. For me, the issue is capturing the wider benefits associated with individual projects, but more importantly at a program level. If we think of the rail transformation program as a program of projects, you can gain an awful lot from focusing at a project level to drive your benefits. And what I mean by the benefits is what the World Bank would allude to around the wider benefits of particularly infrastructure projects, which is the social and environmental opportunities that exist in projects.
The discussion also underscored the critical link between transport and supply chain resilience, especially following disruptions experienced during the COVID-19 pandemic. Dr. Juanita Marie, CEO of the South African Freight Forwarders Association, says a more holistic and skills-driven approach is needed across the logistics sector.
What I can see in transport now, I want to bring it back, that it fits in the supply chain. And we've seen in COVID what is the vulnerability of the supply chain. I think we experience dearly now that you can stop a supply chain if you bring a whole methodology in a supply chain. So I think for me it's the broadest thing that whatever we do, touch on the supply chain, and it's an end-to-end movement. And then when we look at skill set, it's not that it's enough to have a title, is that I must have now a solution thinking approach. And that speaks to the young people. So I think that's where we can have the sweet spot in the logistics. And we have a young nation, so we can embrace that talent because that's what we need.
Global comparisons are also shaping the conversation, with experts pointing to countries that have successfully transformed their transport and logistics systems. Professor Jan Havenga from the Stellenbosch University highlighted India as an example of how targeted infrastructure investment and logistics reform can drive rapid economic growth.
I mean, it's now the fastest growing major economy in the world, the fourth biggest economy in the world, and it's vibrant. And it works. And it's built on two specific pillars as far as transport is concerned. The one is the surgical precision of transport infrastructure, massive investments in dedicated freight railways, in rail reform and things like that. And that was followed up in recent times by understanding of logistics redesign, of freight villages, of terminals. What are the things that you need to do to make a high-end supply chain work? And they've done it fantastically well. And there's still a big gap on our side.
Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Lebogang Mabange in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Africa in Business on Channel Africa.
We continue our focus this afternoon on the impact of the US-Israeli and Iran conflict. And at this time, we focus on Hortgrow. They say that severe shipping disruptions through the Strait of Hormuz and Bab el-Mandeb have significantly impacted South Africa's fruit exports, particularly to the Middle East. Hortgrow's Trade and Markets General Manager Jacques Duprieux says approximately 675,000 cartons of stone fruit and 900,000 cartons of apples and pears are currently at sea facing uncertainty. Efforts to divert shipments to alternative markets have been constrained, as many are already oversupplied, placing downward pressure on prices. For more on this, we're joined on the line by Mariette Kotza, General Manager of Support Services at Hortgrow. A very good afternoon to you, ma'am. Good to have you with us on Africa in Business. Let's start off with an understanding of how these disruptions in key shipping routes like the Strait of Hormuz and Bab el-Mandeb have affected the export timelines and costs. Good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. So at the moment, yes, our shipments, our exports to the Middle Eastern market overall has been completely disrupted. and that obviously results in additional costs being incurred because fruit either need to be diverted and or distributed to those key markets through other means that maybe or include even trucking some of the fruit where it's supposed to go. Some of the shipping lines are cancelling those routes. So it is very difficult. The uncertainty at this point is actually more of a problem.
So with the Middle East taking a significant share of these exports, how big is the revenue risk for the farmers this season?
No, it's quite severe. So the Middle East is a key market for a specific profile of the South African fruit. In general terms, we export about 17 to 20% of total export volumes to the Middle East. So you can imagine once, if that market is no longer there, it will have a severe impact, and if it comes at additional costs as well. And the sad part of it is that the growers are paying for it, for all of the delays, all of the problems that are being experienced. I mean, it's not as if you can even institute an insurance claim against the shipping line or any of those companies. So the producers are really left vulnerable through this war in the Middle East.
One question that one would ask is, why not then reroute? Could you take us through some of the challenges that make rerouting that fruit that was originally destined for the Middle Eastern markets particularly difficult?
So the fruit is packed at source. That would mean on the South African side, in our pack houses, according to a certain specification. So each market has their own export requirements. For instance, if you want to go to India, the fruit needs to be either cold treated, land-based, in other words, in cold storage on South African border, or depending on the fruit kind, en route to the market. But in most cases, those fruit were not programmed to enter into, say, for instance, an India market and then diverted to the Middle East. So that makes it almost impossible to, well, not entirely impossible, but it complicates matters, because now there needs to be trade discussions happening between both our countries, where we need to ask for a specific dispensation. Whilst those discussions haven't been finalized, the fruit cannot enter, and it's perishable product that we're working with, so it has an end of lifespan. So it's not that easy to just divert the fruit to other markets. And even in our local or back in South Africa, at this point in time, what we see happening is that it's causing bottlenecks at some of our packing and cold storage facilities, because the fruit can't move as it was supposed and planned to go. And we are continuing to harvest the fruit that still needs to be harvested, but our cold storage facilities and packing facilities are under pressure due to the volumes that can't move out to the export markets.
Right. I just hear bottlenecks. Mariette Kotza, we thank you so much for that update this afternoon.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Mariette. She's the General Manager of Support Services at Houtgro, as we continue dissecting the various impact of this global conflict on so many industries. And as she highlighted, if the destination is, a country in the Middle East, you can't just divert those markets. There's so many logistical issues that need to be put in place in order to make that available. It's 34 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time. Let's head over now to the markets for the latest market indicators. Bundle Headbush is standing by.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thanks, Thami. Good afternoon. And our final look at the indicators this afternoon. $1 US
is trading at 16 Rand 77 in South Africa. In Botswana, it's trading at 13 Pula 50. In Namibia, it's at 16 Namibian dollars 77. The Zambian kwacha is trading at 19 kwacha 45. In Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 46. In Ethiopia, 156 birrs 64. Uganda, 3,747 shilling. And in Tanzania, it's at 2,601 shilling. $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,376 naira. In Egypt, the dollar is trading at 52 Egyptian pound 43. In Tunisia, it's trading at 2 dinar 93. Algeria at 131 dinar 51. In Morocco, the dollar will cost you 9 dirham 32. And in Angola, it's trading at 912 kwanza, while the Congolese franc is trading at 2,239 to the US dollar this afternoon. Looking at commodities, gold is trading at $5,017 per ounce, platinum $2,143 per ounce, while Brent crude oil is at $102 a barrel this afternoon. And that's the indicators. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please do send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za. Give us a call on +2711 714 4459. For the Channel Africa Business Desk, I am Buntle Hetbush.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
And for the latest from the business of sport, a very good afternoon to you, Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you so much, Thami. A very good afternoon from the Sports Desk.
Africa. It's time to plug into the heartbeat of the continent. Tune in to Channel Africa, your go-to radio station that broadcasts in 5 different languages.
L'Afrique du Sud célèbre la journée nationale du
Kabla hujaitwa kwa jina la Double K
or more of our forests have been destroyed.
Partido Africano da Independência da Guiné.
See, Channel Africa represents every corner of this amazing land. From Lagos to Cape Town, Nairobi to Dakar, we've got you covered with the freshest news, music, and cultures. So, turn up the volume, feel the rhythm. Enjoy the conversation. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Sports on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
And a very good afternoon from the Sports Desk. Apologies there for the technical issue. We'll start our sports bulletin with this story. So Chelsea have been fined $13 million and handed a suspended transfer ban after admitting making $62 million in secret payments to unregistered agents as well as third parties over transfers between 2011 and 2018. Now, the club also received an immediate 9-month academy transfer ban and $999,000 fine over the registration of academy players between 2019 as well as in 2022. Now, the Premier League's report named a number of transfer related to the unregistered payments, including those of Eden Hazard, Samuel Eto'o, Willian Ramirez, David Luiz, Andre Sorel, as well as Nemanja Matic. Now, the club also accepted the historical charges which occurred under Roman Abramovich's ownership. The Premier League said undisclosed payments by third parties associated with the club were made to players, unregistered agents, as well as other third parties for the benefit of Chelsea. Back home now, the long-running dispute involving Samir Nukovic has caused reputational damage to the Premier Soccer League, according to attorney Davor Lazic. Now, speaking to SABC Sport from Croatia, Lazic, who has spent nearly 4 years pursuing an $899,000 settlement for the striker from the now defunct Royal AM, believes the protracted legal battle is harming the league's image. Now, Lazic has now opened disciplinary proceedings against both the PSL as well as SAFA, arguing that the two bodies should now assume responsibility for setting Nukovic's outstanding payment.
Decisions, and it's generally a question of ignoring FIFA's decision by one. But that can be presented for any other national football association, and I think it goes to the integrity of the whole, global system and FIFA system, and basically while protecting Samir Nurkovic's rights, I think that we might say that we are also protecting FIFA and basically the responsibility of Football Association.
Now, the attorney also added that extensive media coverage of the Nurkovic case means it is likely to be among the first issues prospective players encounter when researching payment reliability in the PSL.
The other issue is, it's high-profile case. High-profile. He's according to South African football standards, I can say, especially at the point in time when he signed the contract, he was a high-profile player. He had a high contract, and it was a high-profile media case. So basically, you get also bad reputation, on the league, when players from outside or neighboring country, or like Samir is from Europe, Google in and sees that the players are not being paid, and when they are not being paid, when they go to FIFA and those awards and decisions are not enforced.
Right, so that concludes your sports news this hour. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, do remember to send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 1714 4459. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Get the news, music, and lifestyle of Africa on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Stay tuned to Channel Africa. Stream us on our new and updated website, channelafrica.co.za. Your life, your rhythm, your Africa. Channel Africa. Find it for free on Google Play and the Apple App Store. Stay ahead with Africa in Business, where Thami Ngubeni unpacks your go-to source for Africa's economic trends and development.
Thank you very much to the Markets and Business of Sports desk. It's gone exactly 4:43 Central African time. We turn our focus now to South Africa's Deputy Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition. That's Alexander Abrams. He says that localization must be a national commitment to rebuild productive capacity. He says this will also deepen the value chains and ensure economic growth while creating real opportunities for South Africans. He was speaking at the Buy Local Summit, which is currently taking place in South Africa at the Sandton Convention Centre, and it is hosted by Proudly South African. She cautioned that supporting local production should not shield industries from global competition. And joining us to discuss this further this afternoon is the Deputy Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition, Alexander Abrams. A very good afternoon to you, Deputy Minister. Good to have you with us on African Business.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me.
Now, Deputy Minister, the South African government has for a long time championed localization. What are the new measures that the government is implementing in order to make sure that this drive is more effective? What are you doing differently now?
Yes, so it is something we have been doing for quite some time. And I think what's important in the South African context is that it is aimed at driving, economic recovery and reducing unemployment in all sectors of our economy by prioritizing, the local sourcing and purchasing of goods. As you mentioned, yes, it's not the same as protectionism, because we do want our products to be able to compete on an international stage because they are of quality and they're reliable and they're innovative. But what our focus is in how it relates to our trade strategy is that, the DTIC profiles South African local products on international markets, via our outward selling missions, exhibitions, and, inward buy missions. And we've also taken on a new strategy. It's called the Butterfly Strategy, where we will be prioritizing 27 new markets, markets that have been identified. And we'll also utilize the African Continental Free Trade Agreement to also expand some of our local products into the continent and once again into other markets. I will say that, during this current financial year, thus far, we've supported over 390 South African companies who have benefited through our export marketing and investment assistance program. So those are just some of the, the key government programs that we are using to help get our locally produced products out into, the market.
And what have you as government identified as perhaps the key gaps, those blind spots in the value chain?
So, as you mentioned earlier, it's not a new topic. So one of the gaps would be that we have an ambitious policy, which sometimes slow down during implementation phase. And, implementation can be affected by many things, such as, the lack of enforcement when it comes to non-compliance, or either the poor monitoring and oversight, which can sometimes skew the playing field for businesses who are being compliant and do invest locally. Another aspect could be, infrastructure or structural gaps, challenges with that. It's as you know, South African business, we've been dealing with almost 20 years of unreliable energy supply. And, we're very grateful and relieved that that has now stabilized through multiple of interventions. We also do have some challenges with our ports, which is, taking a whole of government approach just to resolve that, because it is our responsibility as government to create that predictable and enabling environment for, the private sector to thrive. Another gap which we dealing with at the moment is the unfair competition, when it comes to illicit trade, counterfeit goods, dumping, illegal manufacturing operations, which has put some serious pressure on legitimate local producers, particularly in our clothing, textile, and footwear and leather industries. And, these illegal operations, they undermine and evade labor practices and human rights violations. And we do need to work more closely with enforcement agencies and have a better enforcement coordination to respond to this rise of illegal manufacturers and the illicit trade.
And what would you highlight as some of the more successful incentives that have been put in place in order to incentivize, to encourage local businesses from sourcing locally? And do you believe that you could actually be doing more in that regard?
Well, I've been in this job for a few months, and let me tell you, everybody that I speak to, all stakeholders, will always say that, there is more that government can do, especially when it comes to incentives and the incentives offering. But, understandably and realistically, we work within the confines of a budget. So we need to, work within that budget. But then what we need to do as the DTIC is to find those force multiplier industries, the industries that can take R1 and convert it into a R5 investment in the South African economy. So that's what we need to do. And I also think it's important that our investment offerings are competitive, and that it also adapts, constantly to the ever-evolving world that we find ourselves in, and that we also take more note of future planning in our incentive offerings. When it comes to the evolution of AI or climate shocks or, pandemics and conflicts, that as a government, we are prepared to either absorb shocks or to support those critical industries who contribute to, sustainable jobs in our country.
And finally, I want to touch on the role of small and medium enterprises and how they are being integrated into the local value chains through the various localization efforts that are in place.
Yes, so in South Africa, we also have another department. It's called the Department of Small Business, and we work, very closely together with that department because, the integration of small and medium enterprises, they are is essential. I mean, localization cannot be credible if it only sustains, established big business. So what we need to do as government is to identify those points of entries into the value chains for businesses, small businesses to enter. And, as you said, it's the Proudly South African Expo yesterday and today. So stakeholders like, Proudly South African, which the DTIC, supports, they play an important role by promoting local products and by certifying businesses that meet the quality and the content standards. And they also give visibility to businesses that once began in like their garage or in a small township to now expand their business because, dreams aren't meant to be contained. They're meant to grow and flourish. And, the one other thing that small businesses also struggle with is not just maybe finance, but also with market access and market recognition. And, the department has the export support measures that helps small businesses and businesses reach the international market. And we also do a lot of exporter training and awareness sessions to make them more export ready. And I would like to, maybe take this opportunity to invite, your small and medium businesses, if they haven't done so already, to please visit the DTIC's website and to, view what programs we have on offer and what funding and incentives there are on offer.
Deputy Minister, we'll leave it at that for this afternoon. Thank you so much for taking us through the role of localization in the market. That's the Deputy Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition, Alexandra Abrahams. She takes us to exactly 4:51.
As Africa renews, so does its voices. 60 years of Channel Africa. From markets to innovation. From markets to innovation, Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni covers it all. With Africa's future in focus, Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Madame Joël, bonjour.
Bonjour à toi, Thami.
I'm very well, thank you. What do you have in store for us on Africa in Business aujourd'hui?
Non, sur Vue d'Afrique.
Non, Vue d'Afrique.
Oui,
yes,
sur Vue d'Afrique aujourd'hui. Bonjour à tous les auditeurs. Il sera question des morts et des blessés lundi lors de nouvelles attaques des groupes djihadistes à Maïdougouri dans le Nigeria. Nous nous entretiendrons à ce sujet avec notre correspondant à Abuja et nous parlerons également des litiges frontaliers entre la Guinée, le Libéria et la Sierra Leone. Les trois pays ont trouvé comme solution diplomatique un dialogue. Les détails, c'est dans la grande actualité de Vue d'Afrique. Merci de rester connecté. Merci Thami.
Merci beaucoup. She joins us at the top of the hour.
Africa in Business. Africa in Business delivers key insights and real-time updates on Africa's growing markets with Thami Ngubeni. The African Perspective on Channel Africa.
Channel Africa.
So coming up this week in our markets feature, we're going to be continuing our conversation from last week. We'll continue the thread of looking at the importance of buying local, localization. It is heading towards the end of the two-day Buy Local Summit, which is currently taking place in Sandton, South Africa. We'll also look at some of the other key market-moving stories. And to take us through this conversation today, we're joined by Naledzani Mosomane, the head for Enterprise and Supply Development for Business and Commercial Banking South Africa from Standard Bank South Africa. Very good afternoon to you, Naledzani. Good to have you with us. Welcome.
Hi, Thami, and thank you so much for having me.
So look, it's day one done and dusted, and day two almost pretty much done and dusted. What could you highlight as perhaps some of the main themes that resonated throughout both the days, or if you wish, on one of the days, whatever you found to be most pertinent?
Thanks, Thami. It's been a really good 2 days of the Buy Local Summit and Expo. We had quite a few SMEs exhibiting. I think if you look at what resonated in terms of over the past 2 days, we saw that there's a lot of government support or public sector support for local businesses. The government or public sector does want to work and is trying to create support mechanisms. There's also a lot of private institutions really looking at supporting these businesses. We were there, Standard Bank as the headline sponsor, but there were also quite a lot of corporate sponsors who had their SMEs exhibiting and who were also able to showcase how they enterprise and supply development programs support small businesses. And then we also touched on, the SMEs that have gone through or are part of the Proudly SA family, some of the challenges they face, some of the opportunities they've seen from being part of the platform, and just how it feels to run a business in South Africa. And I think the most important thing, an emphasis on localization and why it's important to buy local.
You have mentioned that US Standard Bank are the headline, sponsor, or have been the headline sponsor for this expo. Which are the businesses that you, as the headline sponsor, actually sponsored to be there, and which industries are they in?
We had quite a few businesses across multiple industries. We had one of the businesses that was there was actually a furniture manufacturer. They manufacture some of the furniture that we use in the bank. We had marketing businesses as well, some of the businesses that we use for our events, but also some businesses that have been through our enterprise development program that also do marketing. And then we had businesses in the automotive industry as well, businesses that, supports some of our insurance business that supports our insurance businesses in terms of looking at the panel beating piece. So it was quite a diverse set of businesses. Some of the businesses were also some of the businesses we use for gifting and for branding. So we had a diverse cohort of businesses that work with Standard Bank and have also been part of our enterprise and supply development program.
Are there any stories of success stories that you would like to highlight right now, even those from previous summits?
Yeah, I think we've seen quite a lot of success stories. One of the ladies that was there, Butter and Grace, she was there last year and was exhibiting this year as well. And she was able to secure a contract last year with one of the retailers as well for some of her goods that she provides. Even today, just some of the stories that were coming out in terms of potential opportunities that can come through from the SMEs that we're exhibiting, the ability to just have access to networks, which I think is critical when we start talking about what SMEs want. Most SMEs want market access. To be in that space and to exhibit is critical. And we're hoping that over the next few months, as we work with this cohort of SMEs, additional opportunities will come through as we start measuring the success of today's event.
Naledzani, access to markets and a growth in that arena will then, by virtue of consequence, also spark a necessary expansion of scale. Do you assist the SMEs in then scaling in order to meet this new increased demand?
We do assist them. We typically, scale comes with a financial need as well. And within our enterprise and supply development program, we are able to support our SMEs with funding, whether it's funding at preferential rates, or in some instances, grant funding to help unlock additional funding for those businesses. And then also, because we have such a big cohort of clients and because we work with other corporates as well, where opportunities arise through different engagements that we have, sometimes we are able to connect some of our SMEs onto other supply development programs so that they can actually have procurement opportunities with other corporates.
I'm quite keen to hear what your thoughts are on this. The focus is very much on localization, and yet as Standard Bank, you also have a rather advanced relationship with the Africa-China banking ecosystem. Could you talk to us about that and how you balance the two, making sure that you grow the industry and the relationship with China and those systems while also maintaining the sense of localization?
Yeah, I think there's really good synergies between the two. The Africa-China banking proposition sits within business and commercial banking. So we are focused on localization and on supporting local businesses to run as optimally as possible. Sometimes it does mean having to purchase equipment or assets outside of South Africa, and it is possibly China because we know they're very good at that. Where those opportunities exist, we support SMEs to bring in those assets so that they can run their businesses optimally and also get additional growth or scale opportunities that equipment will help unlock for them.
Naledzani, thank you so much for taking through that. Very much of a balancing act there. But that's Naledzani Mosomani, Head for Enterprise and Supply Development for Business and Commercial Banking at Standard Bank South Africa. Well, that's how we leave it, Africa, for today. This has been your edition of Africa in Business on Channel Africa. Restez connectés as we hand the reins over now to Vue d'Afrique.
Broadcasting in 5 different languages, connecting the continent. This is Channel